Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the action game for Nintendo Game Boy. This is apparently a terrible video game with bad controls, bad gameplay, and pretty much bad everything. Or maybe they're just talking about the version that appeared on the Nintendo Entertainment System, which looks like something off a ZX Spectrum or something to that extent. There are other versions of this game, and it's entirely possible I might have dabbled in those at some point. This Game Boy iteration of the Last Crusade action game is indeed the first time I've played this game within a period of time worth recounting. And to be quite honest, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Mind you, it's not great. It'd be a stretch to call it even good, but this was nowhere near the depths of horrid that I've heard people make this out to be. Certainly not one of the worst Indiana Jones video games that I've played. After all, I did subject myself to this hot garbage some time ago, and this Game Boy iteration doesn't even scratch the surface of wretchedness that the previous exhibition provided. So as expected, you control famed archaeologist Indiana Jones through 6 levels of play, 2 of which has you seeking the Cross of Coronado as an adult, because sure why not, while the rest of the game has you searching for your old father while preventing Nazis from claiming the Holy Grail. All of this information is pure speculation, as outside of this one static shot of Indy staring at the collapsing temple near the end of the movie, as well as a brief blurb of text, you're given no real indication as to the finer details of what's going on. But if you've seen the movie the game is based on, chances are you can fill in the blanks yourself. The Last Crusade starts you off with your basic punch attack, which is slow, covers a short range, and is not particularly useful. This is your only weapon in the first level, by the way, which is a cavernous maze requiring you to collect torches and hourglasses to continue your progress. By the second level, you're able to collect your famous bullwhip, which is something you can swap between by pressing select. Collecting further whips along the way increases its attack power, making this useful against bosses who just stand there and do nothing but take a billion hits to die. Sadly, when you move through levels, your whip resets back to its default strength level, which kinda sucks. There's also a pistol you can pick up with very limited ammunition. Even the crummy young indie game on Genesis gave you bullets to spare. Now, I will give The Last Crusade some positive points because they do exist. The controls are rather functional. Dr. Jones might not be the most versatile player to move around, but at the very least, controls work when they're supposed to, with little to no lag in response time. The 6 stages you partake in follow the same format for the most part, mostly maze-like levels where you need to collect 1 or more relics in order to progress to the next level, whose way is always guarded by a boss. A couple stages, such as the train, are a little more straightforward and they do somewhat follow the movie. The whip mechanics are straightforward and functional, somewhat similar to a vampire killer-esque strike, although unlike the 8-bit Castlevanias, Indy can whip certain hooks to swing across chasms and things of that nature, which is a rather nice move. The game offers 3 lives and 3 continues, although there is a password function for later levels, save for the final one. There's also an option to disable the music if you prefer to play with just the sound effects, although I can't imagine why you'd bother with this option. After all, the Game Boy has a handy dial where you could turn the volume down, and the sound effects alone, well, we'll get to that. The Last Crusade may have functional controls, but that isn't to say that Indy is the most nimble fellow around. He walks at a rather gingerly pace, not too slow, not too fast. His stiff forward jumps puts the Belmont hops in Castlevania to shame, and his descents are slow falls into utter madness. Compounding things is that after a certain period of falling, Indy will take an invisible hit and lose a bit of health, which is a bit of an odd penalty, but it's certainly better than the falling damage penalties of Star Wars on NES. However, despite the somewhat clunky movement, it doesn't make the game totally unplayable. The levels are built around your ability to move around, and they're easily managed so long as you know the lay of the land. Yes, there's a bit of a maze-like element to these levels that makes first-time navigation a bit of a chore, as you're seeking out all the key items needed to exit the level. Some of the hazards chosen to represent the game's pits are questionable affairs, and the 2-minute time limit imposed doesn't help matters all that much, but at least the ladder blow is softened somewhat with hourglass pickups that resets the timer. What Last Crusade can't fix and doesn't fix are the fighting mechanics, which aren't all that great for an action game. Like I said before, your punches are slow and plodding, which makes them a cumbersome attack that doesn't always hit its mark even when the pixels are touching. Collision detection issues doesn't help matters much, especially in regards to getting past certain obstacles that have far wider hitboxes than their visual presentation would suggest, making evading these obstacles trickier affairs than they should be. Getting the whip helps because you could keep your distance, but the fact that it does very little damage at first makes combat a bit of a chore, especially the bosses who have very simplistic patterns but take a ridiculous number of hits to be subdued. So really, once you figure out the pattern, it's a matter of endurance and trying not to get snubbed by the boss attacks, which does quite a bit of damage. Graphically speaking, it's alright. You can make out Indiana Jones and he animates well enough when walking. The various characters you encounter are somewhat decent looking. The various stage backdrops are adequate, if not basic interpretations of the various locales from the movie it's based on. This being on Game Boy, this sort of visual averageness is alright, it's fine. As far as the audio is concerned, Last Crusade sports a limited number of musical pieces, including a couple variations of the Raiders March and some less than stellar original pieces, but give it credit, that's more music than what was on the NES version from what I've heard at least. Sound effects are fine, the whip snapping sound isn't the greatest thing, but it does sound somewhat like a whip snap, so I don't know, not much to say in that regard. Overall, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade on Game Boy is best described as mediocre fare at best. It's a functional game at bare minimum. It has some basic mechanics that work to varying degrees of success, and it does follow the movie it's based on somewhat in its limited fashion, but there's a bunch of issues that keep it from being truly great or even sniffing good game levels. As a side-scrolling romp, it's nothing special, nothing really offensive, and as far as Indiana Jones games are concerned, there are certainly better ones out there. The Last Crusade on Game Boy is far from horrid.